chasing the police every single day.
High Court likely to say states can't levy excessive fines. By Mark Sherman. Yesterday. Washington, AP, the Supreme Court left little doubt Wednesday that it would rule that the Constitution's ban on excessive fines applies to the states, an outcome that could help an Indiana man recover the $40,000 Land Rover police seized when they arrested him for selling about $400 worth of heroin. A decision in favor of 37-year-old Tyson Timms, of Marion, Indiana, also could buttress efforts to limit the confiscation by local law enforcement of property belonging to someone suspected of a crime. Police and prosecutors often keep the proceeds. Timms was on hand at the High Court for arguments that were largely a one-sided affair in which the main question appeared to be how broadly the state would lose. The court has formally held that most of the Bill of Rights applies to states as well as the federal government, but it has not done so on the Eighth Amendment's excessive fines ban. Justice Neil Gorsuch was incredulous that Indiana Solicitor General Thomas Fisher was urging the justices to rule that states should not be held to the same standard. Here we are in 2018 still litigating incorporation of the Bill of Rights. Really? Come on, General, Gorsuch said to Fisher, using the term for holding that constitutional provisions apply to the states. Justice Stephen Breyer said under Fisher's reading police could take the car of a driver caught going 5 miles per hour, 8 kilometers per hour, above the speed limit. Anyone who speeds has to forfeit the Bugatti, Mercedes, or special Ferrari, or even jalopy, Breyer said. Fisher agreed. It was unclear whether the justices also would rule to give Timms his Land Rover back or allow Indiana courts to decide that issue. Some justices seemed willing to take that additional step. If we look at these forfeitures that are occurring today, many of them are grossly disproportionate to the crimes being charged, Justice Sonia Sotomayor said. But Chief Justice John Roberts said the question of whether what happened to Timms was excessive might be a closer call. Timms drove his car to the place where he twice sold small amounts of heroin to undercover officers, and he carried the drugs in the car, Roberts said. Police have long been allowed to seize property in such situations. You will lose assets you used in the crime, Roberts said. You can see how that makes a lot of sense. Lawyer Wesley Hotto, representing Timms, told the justices that in rural areas people drive places. He said the use of the Land Rover was incidental to the sale of the drugs. The case has drawn interest from liberal groups concerned about police abuses and conservative organizations opposed to excessive regulation. Timms said his own view of the case has changed over time. At first it was about getting my truck back because I was mad, and I wanted my stuff back. Now it's a lot different, he said. I was curious to see how often they did this to people. They do it a lot around here, and apparently it's done all over the country. Timms' criminal sentence included no prison time, a year of house arrest and 5 years on probation. In earlier cases applying parts of the Bill of Rights to the states, the court used the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, passed after the Civil War to ensure the rights of newly freed slaves. The court also has relied on that clause: no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law in cases that established a woman's right to an abortion and knocked down state laws against interracial marriage and gay sex. The story of how Timms ended up in the Supreme Court began with steel-toed boots he bought for work in a truck factory. The boots hurt his feet, but he couldn't immediately afford the insoles he was told to buy. A doctor wrote a prescription for hydrocodone. Before long, Timms was hooked on heroin. He tried several times to get clean but said he wasn't ready. A more than $70,000 life insurance payout he received after his father's death seemed a blessing, but it wasn't, he said. A drug addict shouldn't have a whole lot of money, said Timms, who used some of the money to buy the Land Rover. Timms hasn't driven the car since his arrest in 2013. He lives with his aunt, and she allows him to use her 2012 Dodge Avenger, for which he said he is especially appreciative. But it's definitely not a Land Rover, Timms said. A decision in Tyson Timbs and a 2012 Land Rover LR2V Indiana, 17 to 1091, is expected by June.
I can't take narcotic pain medication like a normal person. You know, I had an allergic reaction to it, and my brain said, I want more. And it didn't take long, you know. It was almost immediate. You know, a couple weeks of taking the pain medication, and I was taking it more than I should have. So it's, in my situation, it happened pretty quick. Then for a lot of years, the doctor eventually told me that she couldn't do it anymore. I was supposed to get some different items to help, you know, insoles, things like that, but I wanted the pain medication, so I put that off. I kept saying, you know, I can't afford it right now. The prescriptions are cheaper, you know, they help. So in a way, I was tricking the doctor, you know, trying to make them feel sorry for me so they'd keep writing the prescriptions. And they did for a while. And then when they stopped, you know, I had to find them somewhere because I needed them at that point. So for a lot of years, I took pills. And eventually there was one day when nobody had any pills. And somebody said, hey, I have some of this stuff that's basically the same thing, you know, it's just better. And I thought, well, I like better, you know. So I did heroin once, and that was a wrap, you know. I was hooked. Obviously, I'm sorry. Nobody wants to waste 10+ years of their life, you know. And I hurt some family. I hurt my dad. He tried for years to try and help me, but I wasn't ready, you know. I feel bad. The last year of his life, I didn't really talk to him too much. You know, I think I went about 6 months and didn't talk to him at all. And he called me every day, you know, just to make sure I was okay. And so, you know, yeah, I feel bad. You know, I've put my aunt through things that she shouldn't have had to go through, you know, strained relationships with my sister and my niece. And I'm sorry for myself. You know, I put myself through things that I didn't need to. I should have been smart enough to realize what was going on, you know, when I noticed the, you know, because, you know, at least I did. I noticed that I knew I had a problem quick, you know, but that's the problem with the disease. It, you know, my brain was telling me it was okay. And so, yeah, I'm sorry. It's, I let a lot of people down. The best apology we can make to anybody is to do the right thing and try to live a good life. You know, just do the best we can. That's all you can ask from anybody is, you know, the best you can. And, you know, I think that's the best apology that, you know, I can give anybody is to try to be the best person I can be. Getting on the right track took me a little while. You know, it didn't happen right away. When I was first arrested, spent a couple weeks in jail. I got out of jail, and I didn't quit using. Ended up, luckily, I had my defense attorney knew about a rehab in East Chicago, Indiana here, and he told me about it. It was free, so I called them, and I got on the waiting list there, and I had to call twice a week, I think, until they had an opening. And I went there in January. I think I checked in January 15th of 2015. And even the first week there, you know, my counselor admitted to me he didn't like me very much when I showed up, and I didn't, you know, I don't blame him. I was only there for one reason at first, was to get some jail time cut. And after about a week, I realized this is what happened. He had me write down, you know, and I just thought about this stuff before a little bit. I'd never seen it. He had me write down everything I lost, all the money I had spent, all the relationships I had ruined. And so I wrote everything down. And when you see it written down, it's different than just thinking about it. That hit me, you know, just everything that I had lost, and not even lost, I gave it up, you know, voluntarily. That was tough. And at that point, that's what it took for me to realize that, you know, this is too much for me to do by myself. Because before that point, I was pretty arrogant. You know, I was smarter than you and everybody else. You know, nobody could tell me anything, and that did it. You know, I realized that I needed help. I couldn't do it by myself. So I've done what I've had to. I do the probation. I did the house arrest. You know, it got to a point where probation actually called me, because they would have a person that was struggling, and that made me feel, you know, that made me feel good. But that showed me that I need that once in a while to show myself that, you know, okay, you're doing okay. I haven't gotten in any more trouble.
Tyson's paid his debt to society. He's taken responsibility for what he's done. He's paid fees, he's in drug treatment, he's holding down a job, he's staying clean. But the state of Indiana wants to take more from him. They want to take his $40,000 car as well. That's policing for profit. The interest here isn't doing justice. Police want to take his car so that they can spend that money on their own salaries and their own lawyers.
It makes things unnecessarily difficult for a person like myself who already struggles with different things. You know, to me, it doesn't make sense. If they're trying to rehabilitate and help me help myself, why do you want to make things harder?
Losing his car to local police has made it incredibly difficult for Tyson to continue with his recovery. He's been clean for 3 years, but it's challenging to stay clean when you've lost your most valuable piece of property, your car. It's challenging for Tyson to get to work. It's made it more difficult for him to stay clean and be a contributing member to society. The trial court in Tyson's hometown said that it would violate the excessive fines clause of the U.S. Constitution for local police to take Tyson's car. The Indiana Court of Appeals agreed and said it would violate the excessive fines clause. But the Indiana Supreme Court held the opposite. It said that the excessive fines clause doesn't apply at all to state and local authorities. That decision's wrong, and it's dangerous. The Indiana Supreme Court went where very few courts have gone before. They said that the excessive fines clause in the U.S. Constitution doesn't apply at all to state and local authorities. That's wrong, and we're asking the U.S. Supreme Court to tell the Indiana Supreme Court that that's wrong.
The Indiana Supreme Court held that the state could take a $42,000 vehicle over a crime involving just a few $100s. But no state is immune from the excessive fines clause. That's why this case is about more than just a truck. It's about whether 330 million Americans get to enjoy their rights under the U.S. Constitution.
money. Money makes the world go round. Anybody that thinks that's false is in denial, you know. That's what they saw. They admitted in the trial court that for our first meeting, they decided they were going to take my truck. I've had multiple attorneys tell me that's possibly the only reason they came after me. I have a vehicle. I just can't use it. And it's, to me, it doesn't show that the system is about, it's not about recovery or rehabilitation. It's about punishment.
Civil forfeiture is one of the greatest threats to property rights in the nation today. It allows police and prosecutors to take your property, sometimes without even convicting you of a crime. And at the same time, those same police and prosecutors often stand to benefit financially from taking your property, which of course only gives them an incentive to take more. State and local governments are increasingly resorting to fines and fees, not necessarily to do justice or to preserve public safety, but to raise revenue for local government. And for that reason, above all, the excessive fines clause is more vital now than ever. The government's power to fine is the power to strip people of their cash, their cars, even their homes. It's a terrifying power, and increasingly state and local governments are using that power not to do justice, but to fund their own operations. It's inherently abuse-prone, and the Institute for Justice is leading the charge to combat those abuses.
Justice Clarence Thomas recently declared that it was time for the court to once again look at the constitutionality of civil forfeiture statutes. And the Timms case provides the court with its first opportunity in over 20 years to look at civil forfeiture. We hope that Timms is the one in a series of cases that the court takes on to fundamentally reassess the constitutionality of these pernicious practices.
This is important to me because it's not fair. It's not right. And there's a lot of people that either can't fight their case like I'm doing, or they're afraid. And I couldn't deal with that. You know, that's not right to me, that people can be taken advantage of.
Incorporation's a legal term that courts and lawyers like to use. Basically, it means that the Bill of Rights in the U.S. Constitution protects not just against the federal government, but against state and local authorities as well. And over the years, the U.S. Supreme Court has said that almost all of the Bill of Rights applies not just to the feds, but also to state and local authorities. One of the outlying provisions, though, is the excessive fines clause, which is at issue in this case.
The cruel and unusual punishment clause protects your body. The excessive bail clause protects your freedom. And the excessive fines clause is supposed to protect your property from unreasonable fines and forfeitures. The Supreme Court should apply the Eighth Amendment to all of the states so that our rights are protected.
I've thought about how I'm going to feel when I get my vehicle back. And I don't know. You know, I'm going to be honest with you. I thought I was going to get it back before. And as weird as it may sound, just pictures of the vehicle made me a little bit uncomfortable. It took me back to that time. It's going to feel good because I'll feel like I've accomplished something. Whether I keep it or not, you know, that's not the issue for me. Getting it back will be the end of this fight. And if I get it back, that means we won, and the next Tyson won't have to deal with this like I have.
Hey, Sheriff County, this is Sheriff County COPWATCH. I am using any video here with under fair use if you have criticism, reporting, teaching, etc. And please donate. I do not make money from YouTube. And there are different ways to donate in the video links. Thanks.